Okay, guys, welcome back to the Good Demand Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Ryan Sprague. He's one of the most knowledgeable people in cannabis. He has took it upon himself to create a guide to help us connect with cannabis in a conscious way and for us to succeed in our relationship with the plant, in our lives. And today, we're here to share that guide. Ryan, man, thank you for being on. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, man. It's so great to be with you, Miguel. It's like, we've been planning this for a while, and I was
Yes.
hoping to be in Cali in person, but we'll do part two in person for sure, man. So thank you for having me here.
Oh, I love that. I love planning part two already. So I love that you are dedicated to cannabis. A lot of people haven't really dedicated their lives to something, and you have. And I wanted to really share your gift, which is that depth you have and that relationship you have, and what your mission is, which is to help people achieve maybe not the exact amount of depth as you have, but have the tools in their tool belt that you have found in your years to connect deeply with cannabis and help that plant optimize our lives and keep us away from hurting ourselves. So I want this to kind of be more of a, step-by-step guide all the way through from sourcing to finishing of our relationship or at the end of our trip, so to speak. And I kind of want to just start there. So could we please start with sourcing? Let's say we first want to engage with cannabis. Where do we start sourcing cannabis that is optimal for ourselves? We already know the industrial age is here. It is pushing cannabis to be bigger, stronger, faster, bigger nugs, more THC. It's really been a little bit detrimental, and I've noticed that on my own journey. So could you please help us with the sourcing?
Definitely, man. This is a great question, and I love diving into this because, we have been made a victim of marketing, right? Many of us that interact with cannabis, especially when you think about rappers and everyone that is glorifying this, the cookies brand and these kind of brands. And I'm not here to throw flack on any brands out there. Everyone does their thing, but I am here to spawn curiosity and hopefully some inspiration, right? And my ultimate mission in everything I do is never to tell people what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, because those things don't actually exist, right? We live in a very subjective universe. There is no objectivity here. And so what I do want to do during this section is lay out some things that many people may not be aware of so that they can better use discernment when choosing what cannabis, what method of ingestion, etc., to connect with. And so when we think about cannabis as a whole, cannabis has been utilized in spiritual practice for over 10,000 years, right? And a lot of people don't realize that. We forget that in the last 80 to 100, they have done a fantastic job. I mean, you got to give them credit for all the propaganda that they put out against cannabis, right? And many people don't understand where this started either, and we can get into that for sure. But to go back to sourcing, when it comes to cannabis, the way that most people understand it, and I worked at a dispensary for many years, so I can see this happening as people are coming in. People come in and they say, what's your highest percent? And what has the prettiest flower, right? So those two things are what normally make up people's decision. Because if we think about how we do anything is how we do everything, most people are also thinking about food that way. They're shopping for it like gasoline, as Paul Chek says often, right? So why would they then all of a sudden have some different pattern with cannabis, right? So one of the things that's really interesting is most people think that cannabis has gotten stronger since, let's say, the modern hybridization movement that started happening in the 80s when, the early 80s when people started bringing seeds back from Afghanistan and Pakistan and started mixing with a lot of the Mexican strains that were around being grown in Northern California. But here's the thing, right, is that actually cannabis has lost a lot of its psychedelic properties since that modern hybridization movement. And the reason for that, right, think about it like a video game, right? So I used to play a lot of video games when I was a kid. Need for Speed was one of my favorites. So let's say you're tricking out your car and you have certain points. When you start a game, right, you start with your starter car or starter character, and you have a certain number of points that you're going to credit to that vehicle or that individual's stats, right? So for a vehicle, it might be like top speed, acceleration, braking, and handling, right? Well, if you go, I want to go fast, and you put all your points there, well, yeah, you might be able to go really fast, but what happens when you have to take a turn, right? You have no braking, you have no handling. Also, if you want to get up to that speed quickly, right, around turns that maybe aren't a full-on straightaway, you're not going to be able to get there very fast, so other cars are going to go past you. So this is exactly what happened with cannabis, because as you're ramping up one thing, like there's only so much that can fit into cannabis, right? So the more that you're selectively breeding the high THC numbers, Well, the other things like CBD, for instance, THCV, all of these other constituents of the plant are going to fall away. And so that's a lot of what we're seeing. Now, what I tell everyone is if you have chronic pain or you have cancer or something of that nature, that is an argument for high Delta 9 THC, right? But in most cases, most people are looking to feel some sort of better when they connect with cannabis, right? They just work a long day. Maybe they feel disconnected, and we can totally get into all the challenges that people have with cannabis. But to keep it pertinent to sourcing, they come in and they're geared towards what's the strongest, what looks the prettiest, right? What are the names, these kind of things. But in actuality, that's like looking at a bodybuilder who uses steroids and going, oh, I want to be strong because he's clearly healthy because he has big muscles, right? But what do we know about bodybuilding? Steroids are not going to be good for your organs, right? Things go awry very quickly. And so, the reason for saying this is because I want to open people up and red pill potentially some people about like, if you're simply going on those statistics, you're missing out on potentially your favorite strains or methods of ingestion that you've never even heard of because you've never even looked at something with less than 20% Delta 9 THC. Oh my God, anything below that's got to just be shit, right?
Yeah.
Actually, what I found personally, this is my personal interest, is anything around 15 to 20% Delta 9 THC is my sweet spot. Because for me, I want to be able to articulate words. I want to have good memory retention. I want to be social. I want to be there, right? And Delta 9 THC is also a dissociative, right? We hear that a lot about cannabis. And so that's why for people that maybe don't have the biggest tolerance that are listening right now, you'll be able to remember times where you connect with cannabis, you think it's going to be like the last time, or maybe you were able to talk and now you're just sitting on the couch and you're just like, I can't do anything. Or you're pacing, right? You're pacing back and forth and you're getting into paranoia central. Those are examples of too much THC in both indica type scenario and a sativa type scenario. Now, we can definitely get into indica sativa hybrid kind of being a myth these days because everything is a hybrid. But generally speaking, I'll use those terms so people don't lose me because they are still used very popularly. So that's the whole thing with sourcing, is that just in the amounts and the way in which it's been marketed, people have no idea what they're looking for. Now we dive into some of the dirty secrets of the cannabis industry that many people may not be aware of. And I imagine if they're listening to your podcast, Miguel, there are also people that are interested in high quality living, health, exercise, these kind of things, right? So for anyone listening that purchases organic food, right, that prioritizes sleep, that goes out for spring water, all of the things that we know well, right, that help us feel good. Why would you want cannabis grown with synthetic nutrients, with chemical salt nutrients, right? With steroids of the plant world, these bloom boosters, things like that. Now, if you speak to people in the industry, they'll say, there's no science to back that up, right? And actually, there is quite a bit of science out there now. But here's the thing, right? It doesn't really take science to intuitively understand that cannabis grown in nature, the same way nature intended, is going to be healthier and more full spectrum than something grown with essentially a mimicking of nature, right? And this goes into the unconscious belief that has been being done since industrial farming took over, which is like, that thing nature, we can outsmart that, right?
Right.
Now, when we look at the topsoils going on in the world, right? Why are they all dying? Because of chemical salts. Why are our oceans being poisoned, at least in one way? Because of runoff from these chemical salts, right? Not to even get into pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, etc. So we can see there's a lot going on that if you're not aware of this, you just go to the dispensary, the bud tender greets you, you see a name like Alaskan Thunderfuck, you think that's funny, you buy it, okay, and then you're like, why do I feel like garbage, right?
Yeah.
So again, I don't expect people to know this because it's not stated. It's kind of like an unknown thing, right? That if you weren't in the industry and you also didn't grow organically and feel the difference, you why would you know, right? So one of the biggest things I do, and we can get more into this as well, not to go on a side quest, is I teach people how to cultivate their own, right? So when it comes to sourcing as a whole, though, what you want to do to leave people with some practical information they can take from this episode and actually go try, depending on what state you're in, there are a lot of companies that are starting to grow organically that have similar values to, I imagine, everyone listening to this episode right now, to me, to you, etc. So there's terminology that you want to learn when you're going into a dispensary or you're looking into what companies to purchase from. Okay. So the thing is, very similar to organic food, if something is grown in a certain way, they're going to put it right on the container because that's a selling point for them, right?
Yeah.
If it's not there, do not assume that they're growing in that way, right? And you have to be really careful, just like with organic and all of these things. For instance, natural means nothing at this point.
Yeah.
On something, it probably has yellow 5 and all this other stuff in it still, right?
Yeah.
So now it's like you have to look for like free range and organic when it comes to eggs, right? And these
Yes.
So with growing, there's a couple things, and there's like a hierarchy as I see it. So no-till, something grown in a no-till fashion, that is going to speak to the method of growing, which is exactly how I cultivate. So what no-till means is, think about this, right? So tilling is like the bringing up of land, right? Essentially, like circulating and kind of like stirring the land before you plant in it. The challenge with that, though, is that guess what's in there? There's mycorrhizal networks, fungi networks that can transport nutrients from one area to another if a certain area of a plant or a field, et cetera, is currently lacking in nutrients, right? So when you're tilling, you're breaking up all of those channels and they have to grow again. Now imagine what happens when you're tilling all the time, right? They never have a chance to really set in because mycorrhizal fungi networks take on average about 8 to 12 weeks to establish themselves, right? So when you go around to the forest floor, this is a perfect example of no-till, right? So no one's going around tilling the forest, but yet it's abundant, right? What's happening, right? If conventional farming was the way, how are the forests doing so well? Well, what's happening is as those leaves are falling, as everything's falling, they're falling onto the ground. They're then being decomposed by bacteria and fungi, and they're creating life in that soil, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So when you're creating a no-till setup, right, you want to make sure that like you're at first going to build your soil, you're going to have it in there. And then you're going to put mulch layers on top. And every time you harvest, you're just going to throw more stuff on top, like earthworm castings, barley straw, whatever it is. And you're going to start a new plant, right? And so that's what no-till means. I could get much deeper into it, but I'll keep it simple. That's what no-till means. So that's going to show you that they're growing in organic soil, right? Sometimes people use cocoa coir for that. I'd highly recommend seeking out people that are using soil.
Cocoa coir meaning like coconut shell char.
Exactly. Exactly. And to be fair, like a lot of people say that peat moss is very destructive to the environment. So there is that whole argument. So I'm not going to say don't go for cocoa. Like there are some people that grow in cocoa and they do amazing, right? It's just a little bit harder because of something called cation exchange capacity. I won't get super deep into it. It's not a big deal for anyone who's just going to the dispensary and looking for what to buy. But for growers, that's what I talk about. Soil is going to work much easier than cocoa as a medium, so.
And quick question, just so the no tilling, we're looking for plants that are grown without the tilling to tell us that the fungus are intact, meaning that the plant is getting sufficient nutrients and it's a higher quality plant. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And even simpler than that, though, like, that is all accurate, right? But just overall, no-till means they're not going to be using chemical salt nutrients. It means they're not going to be doing those types of things, right? That's going to tell you just by the name on that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because a no-till fashion, this is a good question too. So a no-till fashion of growing, you're putting everything that plant's going to need for its entire life cycle or multiple life cycles. Because generally when you're doing this, like I only exchange my soil every 2 or 3 years. So again, and that's just based on compaction layers, which again, I won't get super deep into. But at the end of the day, you're putting everything in there the plant needs. So you could be dosing your plants with things like Korean natural farming, aerated compost teas, but it's going to show you that like they want the microbial life alive or they wouldn't have gone out to grow that system. So that's going to tell you, okay, at least I know they're growing in a medium that's going to be in alignment with what my values are, right?
Okay.
So that's what no-till means. There's other terminology that people may use, and they may use things like super soil. That's going to be like, you'll probably want to ask a couple more questions like, oh, are you using any nutrients with that? Because there are some very interestingly marketed organic nutrients. So you just want to ask a follow-up question of like, oh, is that like a no-till grow? Like, are you doing it like no-till? Bud tenders may not know what you're talking about. Ask to talk to the grower, right? Like growers love talking about this stuff, and again, it's no diss. I'm not saying that, people that grow with chemical salts are assholes or anything like that. It's just, again, difference in values, right? That's all it is, right? There's no right or wrong. So when it comes to that, you want to be asking no-till, super soil, or you could say organic. The thing is, though, that many companies, especially if they're a little bit bigger, generally speaking, you won't find good cannabis at big companies anyway, but I digress. They won't use the term organic because that's technically a federally licensed term for the USDA. So many people might not know that. That's why, like, there's another certification that if you find someone certified with this is actually like the very top. But I didn't mention it first because you're not going to find that many companies. In Cali, you might, Michigan, maybe Oregon and Washington, the bigger states. But like if you're in, I don't know, like Missouri, you're probably not going to find stuff like this. So when it comes to this, you're going to be looking for DEM Pure certified, right? Dragonfly Earth Medicine certified. That is a third-party organization that certifies essentially like even more so than organic. To get certified under their system, you have to have a certain number of regenerative loops on your property. So a regenerative loop would be like capturing your rainwater, using your own compost, right? These kind of things that are going to show you from that certification. Again, no one's going to go through all of that hassle and then use bottled nutrients. It doesn't make any sense, right? And you know, not to get super into a tangent, but again, like the reason they wouldn't do that is because there's nothing advantageous to using chemical salts. It's not like you're going to get bigger yields. It's not like you're going to get more potency. You know, that was a myth for a long time. If you're doing organic right, you can completely outdo the yields and potency done by growing with chemical salt. So that's why I say, like, if those things, if you can find a company that's identified with those terminologies, especially DEM Pure or no-till specifically, you're going to be sure they're not going to be using these things, because that means they will have mastered. Like if they put as much money as it takes to grow in that way in their facility, they're going to be using beneficial insects. They're going to be using a lot of things that any of those chemical salts would ruin, and they'd waste a lot of money. So that's the whole idea with sourcing, you know, and I know that was a deep dive, but I wanted to make sure I laid it all out, both the informative side and the intellectual side, and then also some practical stuff people can walk away with and go, okay, I might not understand the full thing of no-till, but I get what Ryan was saying, and I'm going to go use that at a dispensary, if that makes sense.
Got it. So at the dispensary, we're either looking for no-till, if potentially possible, DEM Pure certified. And if not, we're looking at potentially growing our own.
Yes, exactly. You can say super soil as well. And the other thing too, I forgot this one. If you find sun-grown cannabis, typically they will be using an organic system, not all the time. So you'd want to ask a follow-up question, because that's now a whole marketing thing in and of itself.
Oh, really?
Sun-grown, yeah, it's a big thing that's happening out here on the East Coast. And so I imagine it's definitely happening on the West Coast too, and everywhere in between. But if you see sun-grown, that gives you like, okay, like we're definitely working with something. Now let me ask, how are they actually growing it? Are they doing it organically with no-till or super soil or things like that? Or are they using some type of bottled nutrients? And typically these days, depending on where you go, people can get a little crafty. They'll say, oh, well, we're using an organic bottled nutrient system. And you'll want to ask like, cool, well, what are the constituents of that, right? And you're just looking for, like, if someone is able to explain it, like, oh, we're going to be using this and that and this and that. I'm not saying there aren't good bottled nutrient systems out there, like Nectar of the Gods, things like this that I've used in the past. But again, you know, there's a lot of marketing that goes into this. So you just want to make sure you're doing your due diligence when you're looking into stuff.
Got it. Okay. So I love that. That's a lot of information. Typically when I go to the dispensary, I'll just be like, okay, what's the outdoor? Because I know that indoor, that's when you have this, if you're substituting the sun, I've said this multiple times on my podcast, there's something wrong. Food should not be substituted with the sun. And I don't think anything we consume should be have a sun substitute, especially the soil. What do you think about hydroponics? Is that still a thing in the weed industry?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like you can definitely grow plants very quickly in hydroponics. You know, most of the people that I knew that used to grow hydro were doing so just to get big numbers very quickly. My girlfriend Rachel actually was growing hydroponically in recirculating deep water culture systems when I first met her. And yeah, her plants would grow super fast, but when I smoked it, it was just like, there's no flavor here. There's no like really anything going on. And I'm sure there's someone right now like, he's got to try my hydroponic. It's just that for me, like there is definitely an energy that comes from the sun. Like, I don't think that's going to be like rocket science to anyone. And when you're missing that, it doesn't mean that you can't grow good cannabis indoors. It just means that it takes certain things and it's never going to be as powerful as being grown under the sun. But this is why I utilize biogeometry, because for a lot of people, like where I'm at, I can't grow outdoor all year, you know? So there are ways where you can have your cake, eat it too, and make sure it's gluten-free all in one. And biogeometry can be a great way to do that. And I'm happy to expand on that. I won't go super deep into it because it's a deep rabbit hole, but very easy, practical stuff I could give for people to try at home with that.
Perfect. And then I just want to cover all my bases here. When we go into sourcing as well, I'm not a big cannabis consumer, but I see a bunch of advertisement for like CBD, CBN, Delta 9, this other one. There's soap wax, you got the glass. So are those no-goes if we're trying to optimize our life?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, you know, this is the thing I want to tell everyone, like, Delta 8, Delta 9, which is very interesting, is Delta 9 it's a loophole where basically like they're doing some type of molecular process where they're changing another cannabinoid into Delta 9, and that's why they can get around the loophole of the 0.3% THC. It's all just because cannabis isn't legal, right? Like if cannabis was legal, I'm not going to say that Delta 8 and all these things would die out overnight, but you would see their profit numbers drop dramatically. It's mostly, yeah, exactly. And again, like, Delta 8 has its place. Like I'm kind of in the middle where like people would expect me to probably say, oh, I'm against all that. But, I've had some great experiences with Delta 8. I've had some experiences where to me, it feels like it gives me a lot of the body effect of an edible if I'm eating an edible, but my mind is still sharp. And that to me, I've discerned is cool, right? So at the end of the day, like the thing you have to be really careful of when you get into the hemp industry, there's a couple things actually. So the cannabis industry, like we've already gone over, is super regulated, but still all of the stuff we've been talking about is happening. So imagine what's happening in an industry that's much less regulated, right? So that's a lot of like, you have to really know where your product is coming from. Most people growing hemp are not really giving much care to it. They're growing fields upon fields upon fields. They're doing it just to make money. They're not really doing it for the love of it. There's one company I found that cultivates organically with hemp. It's called the Alchemist. And for anyone who lives in an illegal state where you're looking to benefit from products that are completely legal, that's the company I would recommend, the Alchemist. But other than that, Delta 8, Delta 10, CBG, CBD, all of these things, they're really only out there because cannabis is illegal in still many places. And that's the main thing. So what I would say is not to necessarily avoid it. I always take the middle way, but just use discernment in who you're purchasing from, because the energetic signature of an individual gets uploaded into that product, right? And that's a lot of what I talk about with growing. And that's another whole avenue, whole rabbit hole we can dive into, right? Which is like, do you really want the company that was into real estate and finance that is just there to make money? Do you want to be buying your medicine, your sacred medicine from them, right? I know I don't. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm going to pose that question because, again, if you're on this podcast, chances are you're shaking your head yes with me and Miguel right now. Like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that, right? So again, it's like your dollars really matter. Where you put them matters. And over time, my vision is the more of us that start growing our own, the more of us that start stating and being aware of all of this information, we can start controlling the market because we do have the power with our money, And so again, one of two things will happen. Either these companies that are not growing that way will go out of business because they won't want to get with the times, or they'll switch over and they'll start growing organically. Because my whole thing is I want to leave the Garden of Earth greener than when I found it. I want to walk away from my garden after I've cut my plant down and my land has benefited as a result of me being in there and cultivating it, and that's the ethos of everything I teach. I have a 3-part system for cultivating, which includes no-till gardening, Korean natural farming, and biogeometry, right? Super simple. Doesn't have to be crazy intense. But again, if you're growing in that way, if you're sourcing things in that way, a little bit goes a long way. If we all start doing that, I mean, it wouldn't be that long before the world of cannabis shifts pretty dramatically.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's move from sourcing and going into administration, how to administer our medicine. Now, there's multiple ways. What do you think is the most optimal, and or what is the difference between them? I don't want to say what's the most optimal, but is it eating it? Is it bong rips with water and ice? Is it a joint? Is it a peace pipe? Volcano? Could we go in through the differences of administration?
Definitely. Yeah, I love talking about this stuff because there's a lot of things, especially with edibles, that people usually when people hit me up, they have an edible story, right? And
we all have an edible story.
Yeah, exactly. Under the world of cannabis long enough, you got an edible story, right? A lot of people wonder why. So I'll get to that in a second. But first, we'll go over inhalation methods. So this isn't going to be rocket science, smoking or vaping, right? And we can get into flower versus hash oils after. But smoking is probably the oldest method of connecting with cannabis, maybe eating with like Bon and things like that over in India. But at the end of the day, like smoking is the most popular, put it that way. Now, the challenge with smoking, obviously, like anything, is putting smoke into your lungs, not healthy, right? I don't care what any cannabis user says. I avoided this for a long time. It's just not healthy, right? I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not shaming you for it, but it's just to be aware. Like, I want you to be able to use discernment. Is that a risk you're willing to take? For me, I'm an athlete. For me, I love health. So for me, it was like, well, I could vaporize and get the same thing, right? So smoking, that's the whole idea with that. Vaporizing, on the other hand, is heating flour or oils just below the point of combustion. So there's no actual like flame and toxins and carcinogens and things like that that come along with smoke. And so my preferred method of vaporizing is the volcano. A lot of people, when they hear this, might think, oh, my vaporizer card? No. I'll get into that in a second as well. But the volcano is a registered medical device in Germany. It's a vaporizer for anyone who doesn't know what it is. It's about, I don't know, about that, maybe bigger than that. And it's like, it looks like a volcano. And you put a bag on top, very similar to this one right here, right? So you put a bag on top and it blows vapor into this bag. Now, the great thing about the volcano is that you can titrate what temperature you're vaporizing at, if you have the digital version anyway. And the great thing about this is that different cannabinoids and terpenes burn off at certain temperatures, right? So say if you're someone who maybe got some cannabis that you're realizing is too strong, right? But maybe you're just really like, I can't afford anything else and I want to go through this. Well, you could vaporize it at a level, a temperature that does not actually vaporize Delta-9 THC. So you could still be getting CBG and a lot of the other cannabinoids, but you wouldn't be getting some of the other stuff, right? So there's ways in which to control that, right? And that's like a whole rabbit hole. There's some great guides online. I don't have that in the Conscious Cannabis Guide yet. Wasn't my focus for that guide, but there's plenty of things. If you look up like vaporizer cannabis temperatures, you'll find an article. I just sent one to a buddy of mine. So that's, to me, why vaporizing is king. Also, it's healthier. And the thing is, with inhalation methods versus edible methods, inhalation methods are much smoother. And what I mean by that is they come on much quicker. They also leave much sooner. And for me personally, I've just discerned that I like inhaling the plant rather than eating it. I do enjoy eating it from time to time. It's just that depending on your physiology, eating cannabis is going to work very differently from person to person, right? And from amount to amount, right? So for you, Miguel, you might eat a 10 milligram edible and be like, this is child's play. I'm not feeling anything, right? Like, how could anyone feel something at this dose, right? And you might be so convinced of that. And this is where it gets challenging. So then let's say you have a friend come over who's like, Miguel, I've never tried cannabis before. And you're like, dude, like, yeah, eat this 10 milligram. This doesn't do anything. Like, this is going to be an easy start. Now, what's happening here, let's say, right, if that hits that person super hard and they now have an ordeal rather than an experience, right, is that you are what's called a fast metabolizer of Delta-9 THC. So your liver metabolizes things much faster. This other individual may be a slow metabolizer. I am a slow metabolizer and I have zero fat on my body, right? So it's not about weight or anything like that. It can be based on a lot of different things, just molecular and physiological makeup. So this is the challenge when we get into, eating edibles, is that, and it's always a little bit of trial and error in the beginning. And so what I tell everyone is you can always eat more, but it's really hard to subtract if you've already gone too far. There are ways. I'll throw them in real quick. Nano encapsulated CBD, black pepper kernels, and breathing. Those are the three that will bring you back. I'm not talking about Wim Hof breathing. I'm talking about like slowing your breathing, because cannabis produces a sympathetic nervous system response on onset. So typically when people are experiencing anxiety and paranoia, at the base level, it's going to be because they're already upregulated, and now they're getting that upregulation from cannabis that's pushing them over the edge. They are imbalanced. They feel uncomfortable. Just bring your breath back down with some down regulatory box breathing, and you'll be coming back down. CBD works great too, and black pepper kernels work great as well because they have beta-caryophyllene in them, and there's a synergistic effect between that and cannabis. And so when we look into edibles also, the challenge, and this is like one of the industry's dirty secrets, right, that I really get excited to share because not a lot of people know this. So most people, when they walk into a dispensary, they don't really realize, some do, but most don't realize like what actually is in that brownie or that cookie, right? I'm not talking ingredients. I'm talking about for cannabis. Most of us grew up with making cannabis butter, right? Which is essentially taking the cannabis plant, adding it to butter or coconut oil, refining it, and now being able to eat butter that is full spectrum. It was made directly with the flower, right? So in the industry, what is typically done is edibles are made with distillate, right? This is most of the case. You will see a certain edibles made with live resin now and things like that because people are becoming aware of this, but typically they're made with distillate. Now what distillate is it's called CO2 distillate. It uses a supercritical distillator, which sounds like the flux capacitor for God's sakes, but it is a supercritical distillator to essentially concentrate cannabis, right? So it comes out looking like this beautiful golden oil. It looks amazing. But in the industry, it's referred to as poop soup. And I'll tell you why, right? So with growing thousands of plants, say you're a dispensary owner, right? And you have like all of your money. I mean, it's very scary to be a cannabis operation that's fully integrated, vertically integrated, because if your harvest goes bad, where's your money coming from for the next 4 months, right? And there's many things that can make your harvest go bad, especially when you're growing with chemical salt nutrients because your plants have no immune system, right? So what happens is, let's say you get powdery mildew. This is one of the challenges that plagues growers, right? Also spider mites or aphids, right? Well, if you're a dispensary, you're not just going to want to throw that stuff out because where is your money going to come from? So what you're going to do is you're going to take that flower that would easily fail a test if you tried to put it through, and you're going to put it through a remediation process. Now, one of the ways in which people do this is also another technique now that I won't even get into, but to keep it pertinent to this topic, what they're going to do is they're going to put it through the CO2 distillator because technically this can remove mold. So what I'm not saying is I'm not saying people are selling you mold in that way. This does happen a lot, honestly, but in this specific way, they're not selling mold. But what I want to draw our attention to is something a little bit deeper energetically. So imagine you have, let's say, 1,000 plants in a room, right? You're feeding them chemical salt nutrients. You have grow hands around them that are stressed out, anxious, etc. They're under high-powered lights. They then get mold, right? Then you decide to take those plants and put them through an extremely artificial process, right? Mm-hmm. What is the energy of that medicine, right? Like, what is the energy of that final product of plants that were sick, that were not well taken care of, that were molded, etc., right?
Right.
Now you're taking that oil and you're selling it for top dollar to a lot of times medical patients, right? That's where I get really fucking frustrated because, again, I don't think it's right for recreational consumers either. And again, I just personally, I have my own views on this, right? So I'm not saying these are bad people or anything. I'm just saying that discernment wise, I would never want to put that in my body, right? So the other place this distillate goes a lot of the time is into cartridges. And here I'm going to blow the lid on cartridges, right? Okay. So everyone's hitting cartridges. I was just at a music festival. Everyone's hitting vapes, right? Well, here's the thing. Let's assume the medicine inside is clean, right? Let's just assume it's clean, right? The second it goes into one of these cartridges that was made in China with very cheap materials, that cartridge shell begins leaking lead, cadmium, and other heavy metals into your product. Now, what you're doing is you're also adding heat to this mix, and you're heating it, right? So what kind of molecular structure change is happening when you heat lead? I have no idea, but I know it can't be good, right?
Well, it gets smaller for sure, and if you're breathing it in, it's going to get in a lot easier.
Exactly. And so this is like some of the things that most people just don't think about, right? Because they think I'm going to a dispensary, it's been tested, it's all good, right? So I'll tell you a very quick story. So in 2018, there was a vaporizer crisis that happened. You might even remember this. It actually took place out in California, but it got all over the country, where basically people were using a cutting agent called vitamin E acetate on the black market. This is on the black market to cut their oil, and they were giving people popcorn lung and sometimes killing them, right? From this vitamin E acetate. Not the way to go out, for sure. I'll take 0 for 500, please.
Yeah.
So what happened was when this started hitting the news, Massachusetts, because we are very regulated here, and that is a good thing in some ways, they decided, they were like, we know we're not putting vitamin E acetate in these, but you know what? We're going to do our due diligence. We're going to pull all cartridges and we're going to test them again, just to give people peace of mind, right? So when they make cartridges, this is how they do it. They make the oil, they test the oil, they go, okay, everything checks out. They put it in the cartridge, it then sits there for however long they sit on the shelves before they're sold, right? So at this point, this oil had been in these cartridges for a couple of months. So now they're taking the oil back out of the cartridges and retesting it. Well, guess what all of a sudden ended up in all of these samples, right? Lead, cadmium, all these heavy metals, right? So it was a big shock because people had never tested oil that had already been in the cartridge sitting there for a while. And that's before you heat it. So again, these are just things that I feel is my responsibility to share because I see people sucking on vapes. And I'm not, again, going to say don't do it. Just don't make it your preferred method. Like I understand some people are in very challenging situations. They need cannabis for Crohn's disease and things like that. I'm not saying that if you're traveling, you can't bring a vape cart with you. I'm just saying be aware and make sure you're going through companies that maybe have their vaporizer cartridges made in the US. Maybe they've done third-party testing. Maybe they've done that experiment and said, hey, we've tested oil after it's been in there 2 months and we're coming up clean, right? Like there are companies that will be wanting to do this. There are people out there that have great hearts in this industry. It's just very far and few between overall, and it's a shame, but hopefully we can change that, So then we get into topicals, right? So topicals are not going to pass into your bloodstream, but they can be great for like, localized area treatment of inflammation and things like that. So they're not intoxicating, but at the same time, they're going to be really good for just like aches and pains. I have a good one right here from the Alchemist, actually. This one is called Miracle. Really good stuff. I don't think it's available right now on their site. I don't know what happened, but really good stuff. When I'm working out a lot and maybe I tweak a muscle, I throw that on there and it's good to go. Way healthier than ibuprofen or anything like that. So now when we get into the different types, right? Because we went through methods of ingestion. Now we get into the different types, right? So there's flower. Most people understand that to be exactly as the plant was intended, right? Just flower. Within that, there is indica sativa hybrid, which don't really exist, but I'll use them because it's just going to lose people if I don't. But within that, basically, there's going to be cannabis that makes you more relaxed. There's going to be cannabis that makes you a little more kind of like in the middle. There's going to be more cannabis that gets you going. So the old saying we have was indica, you're in the couch. Sativa, you're cleaning the house, right? So that's an easy way for people to remember it, right? So that's flower. Then we get into hash oils. So we've already covered CO2 distillate. You want to kind of stay away from that stuff. Again, not that it's not clean, just the energy of it. It's usually made with like the lowest quality cannabis. It's failed testing. That's why most people make it. When you get into other types of like concentrates, there's BHO, butane hash oil. You want to stay away from that as well. If you're like me and Miguel, who don't want to put anything like that in their body, because there's two different ways to make oils, right? There's making it using hydrocarbons and solvents, right? Like butane, propane, etc. And then there's solventless, right? Like be using ice, water, and pressure, like rosin and live rosin. That's what you want to go for if you're like us anyway, right? So not to be confused with live resin. So live resin.
I thought you were saying it with a different accent. Okay, all right. So it's not live resin.
Exactly. Live resin is still made with butane. So the difference is regular butane hash oil. I'm not going to explain the whole process. I'm not an expert at it, but basically they're just using like dried plant material and using butane. Live resin, on the other hand, they cut the plants down, put them in a cryo freeze to preserve the terpenes, and then they do that process. So the end product is much terpier. It's going to have a much more unique smell to it, but it's still made with hydrocarbons, right? Like butane. So when you get into rosin, again, not to be confused with resin, right?
Can't believe they did that. I know. So confusing.
It's like, you guys couldn't make a better name, like, just like, geez, confusing people. So rosin, a lot of people might remember back in like 2015, 2016, there was the hair straightener, craze, which was you take a nug, put it in parchment paper, you put it in a hair straightener, you press it down, and some oil shoots out the sides, you scrape that up and you can dab it, right? That's like the balling on a budget type way to make rosin. Well, they now have like rosin presses where you like take a bunch of nugs, you put it in parchment paper, you hit it and it goes down. Some will have heat as well, and you'll just see the oil come out of the sides of the paper. It's pretty cool actually to watch. So that's rosin. That stuff is great. It's going to be natural. It's going to be strong as hell, right? So be aware, but it's going to be natural, right? Depending on how they grew the flower anyway. Then you get into live rosin. So live rosin is the creme de la creme, in my opinion. So this is very similar to live resin in the sense that what they're doing is they're cutting the plant down. They're immediately putting it in a cryo freeze to preserve terpenes. But then what they're doing is they're going to make bubble hash with it, right? And then what they're going to do is they're going to press that bubble hash in the rosin press. So it's like, creme de la creme. It's usually between $80 and $100 a gram. It is awesome. And then we have bubble hash, right? So we have just typical using bubble bags. I love doing this when I harvest. It's awesome. And it's great, and one of the reasons that I like making bubble hash so much is something that I get into in the guide too, is if you want to make cannabis more psychedelic, you want to do something that in the industry was almost sacrilege for a long time, which is you want to mix strains together, right? Because one strain, like a sativa, something that's classified as a sativa, might have a high delta-9 THC component, right? But it might have very low CBD. So it might bring forth anxiety for some people because delta-9 THC, again, is producing a sympathetic nervous system response on onset. So what do you do to balance that out, right? Well, you add it to an indica that has a lot of CBD, maybe that's not that much THC. It also has CBN, CBG, all these other things. Then you add it to a hybrid. So what this is going to do in a spiritual sense, indicas are really good at opening up your bottom three chakras, right? Hybrids are really good at opening the heart, and sativas are good at opening up the throat, the third eye, and the crown. So when you put these together, you get this really beautiful synergistic full spectrum effect, right? So when this happens, you're going to start noticing different cues to release energy. You might be stretching, you might be speaking, you might be walking. All different types of things, right? And so when we're looking into that, that's why I like bubble hash a lot, because bubble hash is going to be you're going to be taking a lot of different plants and putting them together, and it's naturally making one of those blends. And that's one of the tricks to making cannabis more psychedelic, right? And for anyone that's another practical thing you can walk away with and try out. Again, I never want to be the person people trust at face value. Question everything I say. Go try it out. Find your own ways to describe it, right? But I think you'll be very surprised with that. So then we get into RSO. Now, this is one that I have a near and dear place in my heart talking about because it's part of my entire story. It's arguably the reason that I really decided to dedicate my life to cannabis. And that is because of what I've witnessed with my own two eyes that I would have never believed if I did not with my own two eyes, right? And that is when I went to my cannabis school, at the same time I was going to school for psychology, I went to this cannabis institute. And this is in 2011. So this is like, back quite a while ago. And the owners of the school, they are amazing souls. And they had a lot of people coming in that were diagnosed with cancer. And so what they were doing and what they brought me into the know of is that cannabis will help you cure cancer, right? And this sounds like, oh, I knew the guy was going to say it's a panacea, blah, blah, blah. It's not a panacea, right? And I'll explain my dad's story to show you that it's not a panacea. But, really what happens is THC will kill cancer cells. CBD inhibits their growth. And you can look this up on PubMed. Now, they've only really done this, like at least the last time I checked a couple of months ago, I look every couple of months on PubMed, they've only isolated certain cannabinoids. So they're not even exercising the entourage effect, which in layman's terms basically means when everything's together the way nature intended it, it all works better. Everything helps one another work. So they're taking things in isolate and seeing these things happen. Now, again, what was happening for me is I'm in Boston. One of the best cancer institutes, arguably the best one in the entire country, Dana-Farber, is here right in Boston. We have amazing medical centers. And so these people would be coming in to Mike and Melissa, the owners of the school, and they'd be showing their scans. I would see them like, oh yeah, stage 3, stage 4, metastasized, all these things. Then they would be getting administered RSO, right? They'd be getting RSO. They'd be going from...
RSO is Rick Simmons oil.
Yeah, Rick Simpson oil. Yep, exactly. Rick Simpson. Yep. And so that's thank you for mentioning that. So the other name you might hear this referred to as is FECO, full extract cannabis oil. And I'll give some resources at the end for people to go diving into the rabbit hole about this too, because there's a lot of info.
They're in the syringe, right? Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Syringe. It's like a syringe without the needle. Yep. It's just that, and you can squirt it out. That's the best way because it's hard to work with. It literally is like resin. Like if anyone's done pipe resin, it looks like that, just like more
like Shilajit.
Exactly. That's the closest thing it's like. And that's the first time I ever saw Shilajit. I was like, very interesting, because they do look exactly alike. So I'd be seeing these people come in. They would then start holistic health practices. It's not just cannabis will cure your shitty lifestyle, right? But they would start implementing and taking themselves out of the situations that gave them cancer in the first place, stopping drinking, smoking, eating bad food, being in stressful environments, etc. And they would then start administering RSO. And a series of months later, they'd come back into the school with their scans that show nothing. And Dana-Farber is puzzled, right? And they're asking them, what the hell did you do? And they're saying, we did cannabis. And they're like, no fucking way, right? It has to be something else. So I would see this with my own two eyes, right? So my father got diagnosed with cancer in 2014. And so I started administering him RSO. Now, my father was someone who was not going to stop smoking cigarettes, drinking Coca-Cola, eating steak and cheese subs, but he was the father that I loved. I've always loved him. He's amazing. And so I decided to just try to help him as much as I could. So his original termination date, I don't know what else to call it, was before Halloween. And he got diagnosed July 9th. Very aggressive small cell carcinoma. So I started feeding him RSO. And my dad was someone who never had gotten high, like maybe once in the 80s. But he had never gotten high. He did not like losing control at all. So with RSO, you want to get someone from a grain of rice sized up to a gram a day as quickly as possible. Now that is aggressive. Like RSO, for anyone who doesn't know what it is like the strongest form of cannabis on planet Earth, right? It's like, and you ingest it, right? So you eat it. So because it's getting metabolized through the liver, everything we talked about before is very pertinent. And so here's my dad trying to eat this cannabis oil and getting rocked, right? And so I didn't really get to get him up to as much as he was supposed to. He probably stayed around 0.2, 0.3. I had him on this for about 6 months, and his tumors were slowing their growth about 75 to 80%, right? They were still growing, but they were slowing their growth. So my father ended up passing the following June, right? So he almost lasted another like 8 or 9 months past when his date was. And I don't know if I would have had that time with him if it wasn't for cannabis. And so during that time, my father and I got to connect on levels that we had never connected to before. And, I'm an only child. I do have a stepbrother and stepsister, but in my, house, the way I grew up, and I'm an only child, I knew my dad, or so I thought, right? And so when I saw this softer version of him come out, this version of him that wasn't afraid of death, this version of him that, was so centered and so aware and so laughable and not serious, right? Like it just totally changed my whole perspective on what cannabis was for me and what my mission was in life in general. And that's what led me to get into the dispensary and do everything I'm ultimately doing now. So, our mess often becomes our mission, and so I think that goes over most of the different forms of ingestion. I'm trying to think if I forgot any. I think we got over everything. So yeah, you got all that stuff. If people want to look into RSO, look up Phoenix Tears. That's Rick Simpson's organization. There's, endless stories there from which to dive into. And you can also check PubMed as well if you're a science geek and you want to check that out, because I like that stuff too.
Okay. Thank you so much. I love it. It's very deep. Perfect.
Yeah.
Very deep. All right. So we have good sourcing. We have chosen our administration, however, which way we discern. Now I kind of want to give the audience the proper timing. I do want to preface that to me, and I think to you as well, cannabis is a spiritual experience, and we want to be respectful and we want to proceed with caution. Anything that is great has power, and we want to move forward with great caution. So time setting, mind setting, and physical setting. Can we please touch upon, what is most optimal? Is it just whenever we want, or et cetera?
Absolutely. This is a great question. So I'm going to write that down. Time, mind, and then what was the last one? Body, physical.
Physicals. Your surroundings, right? Especially with shrooms, that's a big one. It's like perfect. Physical setting.
Yeah. No, this is great, man. I like that trifecta right there. So when it comes to timing, right? And some of these might cross over a little bit, but I'll do my best to keep them separate. So when it comes to timing, right? Like I'm going to lay out a couple of different examples for people to kind of see practicality wise what I'm speaking to. So in one situation, let's say Miguel, woke up late, his whole day's kind of been off. He went to work and he got cut off and you're just like, oh, that fucking asshole to cut me off, right? So then he goes to work and maybe he doesn't know anything he knows now. So he's eating McDonald's, right? And he's just like, just kind of skating by through life. He does the 5-hour energy around 1, gets a coffee on the way home, gets home. His partner is just like, kind of agitated. Maybe he left dishes out or something, right? So he gets into a small little scuff there. And then he goes, what will make me feel better? Let me go smoke this joint, right? That I bought the other day. This is a perfect scenario where Miguel is going to have a bad time, right? The reason why is because this is multifaceted, but cannabis acts as a mirror, right? So it's going to mirror back our internal state of reality to ourselves. Now, there's also the level of like, how is it grown? That energy could be in there too, but let's just stick to this to keep it simple, right? So Miguel is feeling angst. He's feeling anxious. He's feeling disempowered. He's feeling these things, right? And so he comes home and he's like, fucking fine, I can smoke this joint. So he smokes the joint, then he starts having a panic attack, right? Or some anxiety come on. And then he believes cannabis made me anxious, right? Cannabis made me paranoid. You guys see where if Miguel was doing that, which Miguel would never do, right? I'm using you as an example here, of course, but it's like, if that was the case, right? Which for me was many years when I was in my teenage,
Wow.
Right? Like, 100%, like just not knowing. Because again, at that point, I knew nothing about health when I was 16, 17, etc. So I would, be in the wrong setting, all these things, and I would blame the plant. Oh, the plant made me anxious. I don't like that strain, right? And cannabis the whole time is like, what the hell, man? I didn't hold a gun to your head, like you should have checked in with yourself first, right? So on the opposite side, let's say Miguel is who he truly is right here, right? He wakes up amazing, prioritizes high quality sleep, does something he loves for life, leaves plenty of time to get there. So when someone cuts him off, he's like, hey man, I guess you got to get somewhere faster than I do. Whatever, right? If he chooses to drink coffee, it's organic, right? He does all the things that Miguel does, right? He's doing podcasts. He's fired up that day, right? He's on a high and he comes home and he goes, you know what? I'd love to celebrate my life and I'd like to go outside and connect with nature, right? Maybe I'm noticing like it's a little hard to leave work behind. I love what I do so much, and really want to connect with maybe a friend or just go out in nature, take a walk, etc. Right? So I'm gonna connect with this plant, right? So he goes in, he grabs this plant, right? He speaks his attention into the plant. Cannabis, please help me feel more connected. I'm curious about this question. I want to laugh. I want to remember what it feels like to be a kid in a brand new world, right? Then he connects with cannabis and he has a beautiful experience. Maybe there are challenges that come up in that experience. Maybe he remembers being a kid and he wishes he could go back there, right? So I'm not saying that this like perfect scenario is not without challenge, right? But in this mindset, right, he's able to go, you know what? Like, yeah, you know what? It was fun being a kid, but you know what? I can be a kid forever, Growing old, maybe mandatory, but growing up is optional. I got this. You know what I mean? Like, so his ability to have that perspective and that high quality energy is going to influence his experience. And the whole time through, what is he learning? I can move through my own emotions. I can be my own guru. Thank you, cannabis, for showing me where I was sticking, where I had a sticking point, and now helping me move through that with this different perspective. How do I know this feeling is objectively bad? Maybe I want to connect to this too, right? So this goes into a little bit of time and mindset going behind it, right? So when it comes to timing overall, to generalize it, you want to make sure that you are fit to be able to handle the extraneous energy that cannabis is going to bring out in you, right? You also want to make sure that you're fit to see parts of yourself that maybe you might not be the most proud of. That is always an opportunity when you're connecting with a plant whose purpose it is to allow you to self-actualize and self-realize, right? So at the end of the day, I'll give like a real world example, right? So I've had instances where Rachel has told me that I lack boundaries, right? And I've known this about myself, right? But at the same time, my ego was always like, yeah, but I'm not that bad at it, right? Well, I remember during one time a cannabis ceremony, we were talking about this and it just clicked into me. I was like, I know you're right when you tell me that because you are so pure that I know that whatever you're telling me is coming from your heart. And so in that state, I was able to go right past the ego and just go, yeah, that's my opportunity to get better at that, and also see like, this is a great opportunity. Like I said, right? Like, this is awesome. Like now I know the next thing I get to do. This is really cool, right? Not, oh my God, I hate myself because I'm bad at this, right? We're all works in progress here. We're not here to be perfect, right? We're here to be messier in color outside the lines, but being excited to meet a different part of myself. What is that part of myself that lacks boundaries? What is its beliefs? And how can I get to know it more so it feels like it has a seat at the metaphorical dinner table that is my being, right? So that it doesn't feel like it has to lash out or feel shameful around making boundaries, right? Maybe it learned from my mom or dad that boundaries were not safe. How do I know, right? So now I have a breadcrumb trail to follow based on the awareness cannabis gave me, right? So this goes into a lot of like, the timing behind it, things like that, right? When it comes to mindset, and again, these kind of blend together, but when it comes to mindset, you want to make sure that, again, you're fit to be able to handle a potentially challenging experience. You also want to make sure that you're fit to handle bliss as well, right? Because again, if you're in stinking thinking, if you're eating terrible, like all of these things take up bandwidth. And if you don't have any space from which cannabis can speak to you, well, it's not going to speak to you, right? Like it's our responsibility to make sure that our vessel is fit to interact with a plant that can help us. Otherwise, it's just going to muddy the waters more. And that's where a lot of people are at with cannabis. They're simply using it to numb out and they think that's its whole purpose. I smoke this and I forget about my day, right? But then what happens to those people is they have an experience sometime in their journey of being a cannabis user where then they actually disconnect with the plant because they're like, oh, cannabis made me anxious and paranoid. It's like, no, you probably just drank some healthy water that day and finally the plant had a little bit of room to get in and start telling you stuff that was ultimately going to help you, but you chose to view yourself as a victim rather than the hero, And so then when we get into physical, kind of let into that as well, you want to make sure you're treating your body like a temple, right? You want to make sure that you're not numbing yourself out, right? Like this is a reason why I don't interact with a lot of concentrates anymore or anything. I just don't need it, right? The idea for me is when I was younger, the point was to get as high as possible. Yeah. That was what cannabis was to me. So therefore my method was how much can I use, right? Well, what the big shift was about 10 years ago when I first started getting into the spiritual side of this was I started focusing more on what came forth as a result of the effect that we call the high, right? So clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance, clairsentience, this softer version of myself, more intimacy, all of these things that came out as a result of cannabis, I started noticing there's a sweet spot, right? If I do too much, I just end up in the couch dissociated and I'm no good to anyone except especially myself. If I do too little, I might be in purgatory. I might feel like I'm kind of there, but I'm not. I'm like halfway through the werewolf stage, right? So half my body's a werewolf, the rest is human still, right? So I found that, this idea of minimum effective dosing. What is the minimum effective dose and the practical size dose to get me the result I'm looking for? So for instance, if you are looking to go on a solo journey, a deep inner journey, and you're looking to meditate, eye mask on, that might be an argument for going a little bit deeper, right? Because you're going to be in a perfect set and setting. You're going to be on the ground. You can't fall over. You're not going to have anyone around you that's going to influence your experience. That could be a perfect scenario to go a little bit deeper. For me personally, I know that I don't really enjoy having big experiences with cannabis. I just don't need them. I've found for me, I hit one bag in the volcano. And then for me, because I'm a projector in human design, my voice is my source of power, right? It's how I start channeling and things like that. And so for me, I want to get into a conversation. Sometimes that's with myself, right? But I'm usually active. I'm like walking around a little bit. I'm journaling. I'm talking to Rachel. I'm talking to friends, things like that. Because then I start getting on a spin, right? And I'm like, oh my God, this makes me think of that and this and this and that, right? So everyone's going to be a little bit different. And ultimately, it is going to be a little bit of trial and error. I help people with this a lot when it comes to programs. But someone listening, like, again, you can always take more, but it's hard to subtract. It's not impossible, but it is hard to subtract. So when you're hearing all of this, just think like, okay, maybe I usually smoke a full joint. Let me try taking 5 hits and see what happens, right? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? But at the end of the day, try it and you'll be surprised at how little you need to get these incredible states, right? And this is just the beginning, right? Like there's many things you can do. There's many things you can add into it in terms of exercises, modalities, things like that. You know, I think most people understand yoga and moving your body is really good at releasing energy. One of the things I also want to draw our attention to is for anyone out there that tremors and shakes when you interact with cannabis.
Yes.
If you don't know what's happening, you could think like, oh my God, I'm dying, right? It's actually a very healthy thing. It's actually releasing tension and trauma, right? So there's a whole modality around this called TRE, tension and trauma release exercise. So if you watch a zebra almost get eaten by a lion, or you watch a dog almost get hit by a car, or you yourself have a near brush with death, you're going to start naturally going into that response to let go of that trauma. What do humans do? Because we have a mind, I'm strong, I don't need to feel that, right? And so we just keep locking it in, right? Especially men. Women are much better naturally allowing it out, right? But talking to you men out there, when you do that, it might seem as though you're being strong, but actually you're going to end up very weak to everyone in your life because you're going to be short-tempered, you're going to be throwing the trauma around everywhere. So I'm telling you, it's not cool to do that, right? So if you start shaking, allow yourself to just sit down and feel into it and don't worry about it. It will end. Like I had an experience like this at the music festival and it was great. It was amazing. I shook for like 3 hours and awesome. I wasn't like violently shaking, like it came and went, but it was like, I mean, it was literally orgasmic when it was happening. It was just like, I could feel all this stuck tension just leaving my body, you know, and it was just beautiful. And you come out of it feeling like a wet whistle. It's amazing, you know? And so, you know, again, that's what I would say when it comes to time, mind, and physical. We didn't get into set and setting, but we obviously went over a lot of the things. So again, just make sure that you're in a setting also that's practical, right? So I talked about laying down if you want to go into deep experience. You know, I always like to add this in too. So a lot of people, when they hear me talk about cannabis, they hit me up and they're like, does this mean I can't ever go to a concert and like enjoy a joint again with a friend? I'm like, no, it doesn't mean that at all, right? Like, you know, for me personally, I understand and understand the idea of sacred medicine. I understand sacred space. I understand intention. I understand ceremony. But I do not believe those things have to be somber, challenging. You have to be wearing white robes. I don't believe that stuff. Like, I believe that if we are all the ocean in a drop, aka we are all God experiencing itself in infinite different emanations, then what is more sacred than being intentional with anything in our lives and then going and doing that thing? Like that is to me what creates sacred, you know, like, or creates a sacred union between you and the plant. And so being able to say, hey, tonight I'm going to go to this concert with a friend of mine that I haven't seen in a long time. We're going to connect with cannabis in a ritualistic manner. We're going to pray to it first. We're going to speak our intentions into it. We're going to make sure we do minimum effective dosing. And then we're going to go have a fucking blast, let our inner children out and learn, right? I'm going to learn as I'm dancing. Why am I able to get into such a flow? What does this remind me of? Oh my God, painting gets me into this flow and I haven't had enough time to paint recently. Maybe that's the breadcrumb trail cannabis is showing me that I can integrate into my sober state of reality. Because here's the best part. The reason why I talk about cannabis the way I talk about it is because when you start integrating what the plant's teaching you, your whole entire life becomes the psychedelic experience. And then you naturally will not need cannabis as much as you felt you did at one point in your life, right?
Yeah.
Tell everyone, like, most people are using cannabis as a coping strategy. And so when you're doing so, your problem is not cannabis. The solution that you found, solution in quotations, is cannabis, coping strategy. Cannabis can also be the thing that can help you discover what the hell the root is. It can be challenging to do that alone. That's a lot of what we do in the community, right? We help people figure that out and then be held accountable to whom, what they want to become in the year we have together. So again, it's just like, it's almost like we've been hoodwinked through all the propaganda and everything. But again, there's so much more to cannabis, guys. And if you need more evidence, there's a book right here called Cannabis, Magical Herbs and the Occult by cannabis historian Chris Bennett. Over 10,000 years of recorded historical use of cannabis in every occult practice, pretty much every one since the dawn of time. Mention of cannabis in the Bible, mention of it all throughout. Also, for anyone who knows Yogananda was a fan of cannabis as well. So again, like, you know, I'm part of organizations that bastardize cannabis, right? Like I joined them to see what they were all about, and I started to distance myself when I realized how they talked about these medicines. But But again, like there's much more out there if you want to go dig for it for sure.
Thank you so much. So time in regards to that, there's some of us who use cannabis when we're having a great time. We celebrate with cannabis. And then there's also at the same time, we're not celebrate, but we use it to cope, right? You're psychology, you study psychology. So did I got my degree in psychology. So I know, yeah. So I know that if you do something and you get this outcome, smoke weed, and then you have this different outcome, and then you have the same response, there has to be some kind of link in the brain that's starting to cross wire. Is that something you've noticed with the clients you work with, or?
Yeah, 100%. So if I understand what you're saying, you're basically saying that like people that celebrate with cannabis versus people that numb out with cannabis, there's a correlation there. Is that exactly what you're asking? I want to make sure I have the perfect, rendition of your question before I answer.
No, because I used to do this as well. So if I had a good day, I celebrate with cannabis. If I had a bad day, oh man, I got to use cannabis. That has to do some kind of cross wiring there or something, create some kind of dependency or something.
Yes, I'll explain that. And this is great. I'm so glad we're getting to this. So this is like a really good question because I think this is where a lot of people are at. This is where I was at. It wasn't always like, I didn't have a shitty day every day, but all I knew is every night I was connecting with cannabis, right? So what was going on? Well, it was a couple different things, right? And I'll speak to my own experience and I'll kind of give some more general things I've seen as well so people can kind of piece things together. So overall, cannabis can produce feelings of comfort because it's feminine medicine. So especially for men, but also for women too. What do men generally suck at? Giving ourselves love, right? We're starting to come out of this now, like our generation's like it's now big talk in the world. But again, we still live in a bubble. Like for a lot of men, they're still like, I don't cry, I don't show love, like I'm masculine, I get shit done, right? And so at the end of the day, a lot of the reason why men love cannabis so much is because it's the first thing that allows them to take the mask off of being the serious, hardcore alpha in quotations, which is if you're not in touch with your feminine, you're definitely not an alpha, but that's a conversation for another day. But, at the end of the day, they are finding some source of comfort that unconsciously, normally it's unconscious, they do not believe they can give themselves. So if you do not believe you can get something without something external, you are going to go to that thing externally and you're going to be disempowering yourself each and every time you do, because what are you telling yourself? I can't do this myself, so I need help, right? So it's the difference between going to a coach once, right? Like say you have a coach that you meet once a week, right? In one scenario, you go to this coach once a week, you guys meet, they give you some action items, you go tackle them, right? Maybe you hit your coach every once in a while, I got stuck on this one, but you generally like, I know what I'm doing, right? I feel empowered to do this. On the other example, you meet this coach, they give you action items, and literally the second you got the phone, you hit them up like, I don't feel strong enough to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. Coach is like, all right, they do another hour with you. Hey man, I'll give you a free hour. Just like, let's dive in. Okay, cool. You all good? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, you got the phone literally 5 minutes later, same thing. Imagine that happening. That is a practical example of what's happening when people are going to cannabis all day, every day, or even just every day, maybe even once a day. So think about it, right? Whether you're having a good experience and you don't know how to feel good in your own, right? So you need something external to represent a celebration for that, or you are needing feelings of comfort and you don't know how to provide them for yourself. It's the same thing. You're seeking an external source of comfort because there's a feeling that you don't know how to access on your own. That's the through line, right? The energetic signature on it is different. In option A, where the person is disempowered, you're probably going to notice it a lot easier. They're going to notice it a lot easier. It's kind of like the difference between, someone who's a fall down alcoholic that like, you're like, dude, we got to do an intervention, versus someone who hides it very well. It's same, but different, of course. I don't like to compare cannabis to alcohol, but it's at least relevant and general enough that people can be like, okay, I get what you're talking about. So in example A, this person just does not know how to feel anything without, let's say cannabis, right? They don't know how to bring themselves back from a challenging experience throughout their day. And so they're just like, cannabis is their safety net. It's their coping strategy. On the other side, if you're like me, I knew throughout the day what to hop myself up with, right? To be able to be on and all these things, but I sucked at turning off, right? So at the end of the night, I would use cannabis to access a feeling called relaxation. So I could actually turn my brain off, because unconsciously I was like, I don't know how to fucking do this, right? All I know is I can't fucking sleep. So I'm just going to use this and it works and I'm just going to keep doing it, right? What I didn't realize though, was that then when I wanted to say, go on vacation, Rachel's like, let's go to the Maldives. I'm like, I can't bring cannabis. I'm not going to be able to sleep, right? That is not an area of life you want to live in, right? Like that's not a pattern you want to be in because it's super limiting. And I think that resonates for a lot of people with cannabis, because when I went to the dispensary or when I worked there, every other person was, can you bring this on planes? Like, I don't know what I'm going to do about my cannabis. And that's, again, I've been there, guys. So I'm not judging, but I'm telling you, been on both sides now. I feel no issue taking a month or more off of cannabis. I took a 5-week break a little while ago, right? No big deal anymore, because I enjoy what cannabis does to me, but a lot of the times, or does for me, but a lot of the times, like, I know how to access that stuff myself, right? And so there'll be times where maybe I have an intention to connect with Rachel and we'll connect with cannabis, or I'm at Paul Check's house and everyone's like, can you make a bag? I'm like, of course, right? Like, cannabis is beautiful at, opening up some things. And at the end of the day, like, it's not necessary, but if we look at the world we're in right now, all of us are moving so fast, we're missing out on connections. Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And so every once in a while, I like to connect with cannabis and be like, what am I missing, if anything? What is my ego not allowing me to see? And I don't have the luxury of my life right now. Great, very grateful about it, to be able to take weeks off of my life and go down and do ayahuasca, or even take 6 hours of my life off to do psilocybin. I got a community of 100 people. I'm fired up about it. I'm in there every 5 minutes. Like, that's my power zone. So if I connect with cannabis and then someone needs help, I can do that, right? So for me, it's about having your cake, eating it too, and it's gluten-free. So for me, cannabis is just so practical. And that's why I'm like so shocked that so many people have slept on it for so long, including myself, because, again, you can grow it in your backyard in most states, legal states anyway. It doesn't last that long. There's ways in which to connect with it where you don't even get intoxicated, right? And it's got so much recorded history, right? Not that psilocybin doesn't and whatnot, but, for a lot of people, psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, ketamine, ayahuasca, they're still super stigmatized. But cannabis, like, if you tell someone you smoke cannabis, they're not going to be shocked and awed. They're going to be like, oh, I might not do it, but whatever, So that's what I would say regarding that through line you were talking about. That's a good question too.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're moving along here. We got the proper sourcing. We chose our form administration. We got some good timing on us. We're happy. We're healthy. Dosing. We're about to dose. We did slightly touch upon it. Could we just touch upon that really quick?
Of course. Yep. So what I'll say for this, I said a little bit of it before, but it does bear repeating because this is very important, right? So when it comes to dosing, everyone's physiology is going to be different, like we talked about with edibles and things like that. So it's not as easy as saying, guys, every time take 2 hits and you're going to be good, because also the strength of flower differs and things like that. What I will say though, overall, is like a general, just like follow this and you'll be good to go. Minimum effective dosing and practical dosing is what you want to do, right? So there's a through line between them, right? So minimum effective dosing means, like I said before, what is the smallest amount I can connect with to get the desired result? Practical dosing is what is the dose size that I need to get this certain intention to play out, right? So the example I give here is, let's say that I want to have an intimate lovemaking session with my partner, right? Probably not going to want to eat a 200 milligram edible, but that quickly, right? Like, depending on, again, this is an aggressively sized dose, so please no one take this and be like, that's a normal sized dose, I'll go do that. It's not. I'm just using it as an example. That maybe, not for me, because I would get rocked for it, but for Rachel, she's actually a very fast metabolizer of THC. For Rachel, 200 milligrams might be perfect to go lay down and do a meditation with, right? So it's not that either one of those scenarios is wrong, it's just that what is the appropriate dose size for that? And it's not about rules, guys. Like, I'm not a rules guy. It's just simply like, do you want to get the most out of this plant? Do you want to be able to have an entire life that benefits as a result? Okay, cool. Then this should matter to you. That's what it is, right? Like, it's not about rules or, giving you shame or guilt. Like, at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning, it's not my job to tell anyone what's right or wrong, right? So that's what I would say. Minimum effective dosing mixed with practical dosing. And what I would say with this in terms of like different methods for edibles, for someone who's a newbie, start with like 2.5 to 5 milligrams, right? For some people, they might be laughing at that right now. But at the end of the day, like, there's no right or wrong answer. So start low, go slow. That's always the way. And after a couple of times, you'll be able to find like, oh, I eat 10 milligrams and I'm good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, after about 2 or 3 times experimenting, you'll find your desired effect. And if you're not doing it every day, your tolerance will stay down and that will stay your dose size. I mean, even for me, when I go through, like, I just went to a music festival, I connected with cannabis every day there, right? Even for me, the last day I was still getting just as medicated off the exact same amount. Like, literally, I've always had a very low tolerance, even when I was a daily user. And so again, at the end of the day, like, depending on how healthy you are, you could have a very low tolerance that stays low forever as well. Again, that's going to play into how much THC is being stored in your fat cells, right? How your cannabinoid receptor is doing, what's your brain health like? Are you taking nootropics? Are you taking magnesium L-threonate? all of these things play into it. Are you eating a lot of omega-3s? There's a whole thing people can find online about optimizing your endocannabinoid system. And there's actually a lot of research. I won't get super deep into it, but it is something that people should be aware of. Look into clinical endocannabinoid deficiency or dysfunction syndrome. There's a lot of talk about that being a huge component behind things like fibromyalgia and things like that, like kind of like these mystery diagnoses. So look into that. If you're someone that's struggling with an autoimmune disorder, things like that, it might be a breadcrumb trail for you to follow for sure.
I love that. Thank you for hitting on like these micro doses, because for myself, if I do a 5 milligram edible, I did that last week, and I almost had an ordeal. I was like, oh my God. I was like, geez, I started to start breathing, and I was like, dude, 5 milligrams, because I don't connect very often. So I was like, whew. But obviously, you get that, it's the 11 Delta, or which one is it?
So that'd be Delta 9 THC. Depending on, again, like if you bought Delta 10, then it would be Delta 10. But if you're going to the dispensary, like a typical dispensary, it's going to be Delta 9 THC. But there's also going to be THCV in there, which isn't necessarily psychedelic on its own or intoxicating, but when it's mixed into the entourage effect, it can be very stimulating. And that can add to the effect of like, oh man, now I'm feeling kind of anxious. So these things work together. There's also THCP. It's not seen as often because it's been bred out over the years, but it's actually between 7 and 10 times more antagonizing to the CB1 receptor, which basically translates to it's much stronger than Delta 9 THC. So that's another reason why, if you're just looking at Delta 9 THC, imagine for the average consumer, they walk into a dispensary and they see 12% Delta 9 THC. They're literally going to laugh at that, and they're not even going to give it a second shot. But let's say it has THCP in there that actually makes it way stronger than anything else in that dispensary. They would never know, right? So that's why I tell everyone, experiment. Your favorite strain, your favorite experience could be waiting the next jar over that you're not looking at because it doesn't have a high enough Delta 9 THC amount, So
right. That's great advice. That's great advice. Okay, so we got the dosaging down. Pre-consuming our dosage, I've heard you speak a lot about intentions and setting those intentions. Is that maybe the only thing we need to do right before we take our dose? Setting our intentions, prayer. Obviously, we're trying to engage with it consciously.
Yeah. So this is a great question too. So there's many things you could do. Like I'll lay out some examples. So intention is the standard. Like I'm always using intention. Every single time I connect with the plant, I give it intention because it's a feminine medicine, right? If we look at masculine and feminine polarity, feminine energy is all potential creation, but it's not action. Masculine energy is action, right? So when we look at how to balance the equation between masculine, aka us moving into the experience, whether we're male or female, or whatever gender we are, and then looking at a feminine plant, what we must do to equalize it is we must provide a masculine component of energy to equalize that equation. So intention is that masculine direction setting intention, And so basically what you're doing here is you're showing the plant and you're speaking to it exactly what you're looking for. So the analogy I always give here, and I think I actually use this in the guide too for anyone that checks it out, but it's like, okay, imagine that you are a child and you are sick, right? You're home from school and your mom comes in, she's like, Miguel, can I get you anything? Right? And you just stare at her and you don't say anything. She's like, all right, you weirdo, I'll be back later, right? And she leaves, right? Right?
Yeah.
So you didn't give her any direction. So she doesn't know how she can help you, right? She might start pulling random stuff out. Like, I don't know, do you want SpaghettiOs? Do you want chicken noodle soup? And you're like, Mom, I don't want any of that. She's like, I don't know what to give you, man, And so let's say on the other side, same situation, you're sick at home. Mom comes in, Miguel, can I get anything for you? And you're like, Mom, I really want some chicken noodle soup. She's like, I got you, right? So she goes, she gets you the food, she brings it into you, she does all the things, and she's on cloud 9 and you're on cloud 9, right? Why? Because you guys equalized, right? She asked what you wanted, you knew what you wanted, you gave her the direction, and now she knew exactly what to go do to help you feel better, right? Positive energetic loop. So with cannabis, many people end up accidentally, because I tell everyone, whether you are doing it consciously or not, you are setting an intention. That's why intention is so important. It's not like, oh, I don't believe in that, so I'm not going to do it. It's like, cool, you're already doing it. It's just that it's coming from whatever your unconscious mind is thinking about, which if you think about the whole idea of 75,000 thoughts per day and 80% plus are negative, you probably don't want your unconscious setting your intention for you, right? So at the end of the day, if you tell cannabis, I would like to experience joy on the other side of this session, of this ceremony, it doesn't mean that it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows, right? It might mean that cannabis goes, all right, man, well, I could either give you a fish or I could teach you to fish. So I'm going to show you the stuff that's actually standing in the way of you being able to access joy without me, And so in that container, because you set that intention and you have the awareness, you might be able to go, yikes, I'm feeling some anxiety. You know what? Maybe this is standing in the way of me experiencing joy. And so now you can contextualize why this situation makes sense in your reality. That's a lot of the reason why people have bad trips, because they just can't contextualize it. They're like, I don't know why this is happening. This wasn't supposed to happen. This isn't how I viewed it. I didn't even understand this was a possibility, right? And so now they're having a bad time. But it's not because it's objectively a bad time. It's because they're failing to learn the lesson. They're running away from that which they fear, And like Joseph Campbell states, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek, And so this is how all plant medicines work, right? We hear it a lot with ayahuasca, right? Like, why do so many people come back from ayahuasca and they're like, yeah, I faced all my shit and it was fucking awesome. Why? Because they were being taught by a shaman, like, this is actually how this works, right? And I'm not purporting that I'm a shaman, but, at the end of the day, these are not rocket science type things, right? If you go to indigenous culture and you're like, you think intention matters? They're like, are you fucking serious? Like, yeah, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, get off your phone for a little while and you realize, So at the end of the day, it's not to diss anyone or anything. It's just, again, none of us ever got a user manual for the plant. And so that's really what we seek to create in everything we do, is a long lost user manual for cannabis. And it's simple, guys. Like, it doesn't have to be, again, for most people listening to this, I imagine you do resonate with spirituality, but it doesn't have to be something in galactic terminology or anything. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to wear white robes for any of this stuff. Like, again, like, reverence does not depend on external circumstances. It depends on your intention coming from within, right? That's what makes something, to me, ceremonial, reverent, sacred, etc., right? It's you respecting that plant, knowing the power that comes along with that plant, and understanding and understanding the great responsibility that is on you to make sure that you're checking in on yourself before you connect with it, that you know why you're connecting with it, and that you follow the breadcrumb trail coming out of it, right? Because, again, what most people do is they connect with the plant, they feel some sense of better, they then come out of it, they feel less better, less good, and then they go, oh, 2 and 2 must equal 5. I must need more cannabis to feel good all the time. And now they've completely missed the mark, right? And again, it's not a judgment. It's just like, again, my intention here is to share my own experiences, which I've done all of these things, which is why I can speak to them now. And so when you start adding intention in, wild things start happening. Because, again, it's not that cannabis is showing you something that you needed cannabis for. It's showing you how many different ways you can access this yourself. And so what starts happening as you start realizing over and over how powerful you are? Well, depending on what you believe in terms of spirituality, I can tell you what I started realizing. Holy shit. Now I'm starting to experience that I am God, right? And that everything is God, and that we're all divine beings having a human experience, that the grass outside is God, right? That we're all experiencing this. You can read that in a textbook, but cannabis and these other medicines give you an opportunity to experience it when you've forgotten how to get there on your own. And so my entire ethos with cannabis is, I want to remember. I want to know who I truly am. And so I connect with the plant in an intentional, ceremonial way to help remind me, to be my pocket coach, my pocket spiritual coach that will check me before I wreck myself, right? Which will check my ego, which will allow me to realize, oh shit, I was out of turn there. I don't want to show up that way. That doesn't show up like God. I want to go apologize to that person now. I want to go make sure that I'm making right by myself, because that's not who I am. That's not who I'm discerning I am, right? Now, again, what it can also show you and what it will show you, I tell everyone, like, most of cannabis work is shadow work. And so, again, at the end of the day, it's going to be showing you aspects of you. This is another whole reason why people have challenging experiences. They see a part of them, like paranoia or anxiety, and they go, no, I don't want that. That's not me. So what do? They refuse an aspect of themselves, right? Because we are everything. If we are the ocean in the drop, then we have all the parts of the ocean within that drop, right? We have the maniacal maniac in us, and we have the Gandhi in us, right? And until we've really resolved all of that and chose to accept it, not fix it, because there's nothing to fix. Just be aware that, like, oh yeah, if I get cut off, like, I'll remember real quick that I do still have an ego, right? My ego goes, like that, right? But can I catch it fast and go, oh, there's that part of me again, and laugh about it? It's not about fixing. It's not about being a transcendent being. It's just about being able to laugh at the hilarity of the human experience, right? And love yourself in all hyphen ways. And so that's a little bit about what I would say with that, with regards to intention and things like that. So you want to set your intention. You then want to go into, and this is kind of like, this is our 4-step process called the highly optimized way that you'll see in the guide too. So first step is you want to take 3 days off before you connect with cannabis in the ceremonial way. Again, not based on rules, just cannabis is going to work more psychedelically if you don't have a saturated endocannabinoid system, straight up, right? So you take a 3-day break. When you come back from that break, the first day you're back that you're going to connect, that's your ceremony day. You're going to create your intention, whatever you want. You're then going to move into your ceremony. This is step 3. So break, step 1, intention, step 2, ceremony, step 3. Ceremony, whatever your ceremony is going to be relevant and practical to what intention you have, right? So you want to connect with a friend at the concert? That might be a great scenario, right? You want to do deep inner work? Probably don't want to go to a concert, right? Probably want to be in your bed, right? So these kind of things, right? So create a ceremonial structure. You can do things like saging yourself and using Palo Santo. Those are great. You can do 7 directional prayers. You can do other rituals. You can do Kundalini yoga, whatever you want to do, right? Make your own ceremony, you know? And so then once you've gone through your ceremony, typically what's going to happen for people is they're going to get either one or multiple ideas, right? Which is my terminology for the ideas that come from above, right? Ideas. And so when you get those, you want to have a notepad next to you, just like this. And you're going to be writing stuff down, right, as you're going through experience, just little scribbles, right? One of the most challenging parts is realizing what the real ideas are and what just like the funny things are, because sometimes your ego will play tricks on you and try to get you to get out of the experience. So, you know, use discernment with like, is this just like a funny saying or is this going to change my life type stuff? And so sometimes the other opportunity you can do is just not write anything down and just choose to be like, I'm going to remember what really lands for me. But whenever you come out of that, now the real work begins. Now you go, why could I experience that with cannabis, but I have a challenge experience of that on my own, right? That's your breadcrumb trail. That's the idea of, I got this creative insight that the reason I have a creative block is because I'm not giving myself enough time to paint, right? When you come out of that, the 4th step, which is integration, would be actually buying the paint kit, signing up for the paint class, you know, like following the breadcrumb trail. And so that's our 4-step process. It's going to lead you to what to do before, what to do during, and then what to do after as well.
Oh, perfect. Because that's literally the next step is during the trip. And I had a few pointers here of journaling, enjoying it. And then you also mentioned on the podcast before that cannabis is not as intense of a psychedelic. So you could actually start taking some action on some of those things. So that's another thing to do well. You're having a good trip and it's going well. When it's going bad, I've also heard you talk about, you know, connecting, identifying what it is, seeing what sensations you're feeling, and then going into breathing. Is that still correct?
Definitely, man. I'm glad you brought this up too. So when we're having a good experience, right, because I want to touch on that real quick, one of the best parts about cannabis and why it's so practical is because, like, let's say you're a parent listening to this, right? And you're going through a deep ceremony, right? Kid opens the door, Mom, I spilled flour all over the floor. You could get up and clean that flour up. You'd probably laugh about it, right? Like, try doing that on 5 grams of mushrooms. Yikes, right? It's around for that, right? Obviously. And so, you know, not that it's bad. It's just like, you know, what if your kid has an accident? You can't bring him to the hospital type thing, right? So again, it's just like, you know, cannabis is practical for most people's situations. So if you're having a really good experience, what you can do is you can start taking action on that right away. So let's say you get that creative insight. Oh my God, I'm going to sign up for a paint class. You could literally sit up, go on your phone, look up paint class, signed up, boom, go back into ceremony, right? So like you can take action right away. You can create notes, right? You can put things in your calendar. That's why I love cannabis so much. Because again, like all these plants and medicines will do this. Just cannabis is the only one that I make sure I'll never forget anything because I just do it right away, you know? So on the other side, if you're having a challenging experience, there's some things you can do. We mentioned a couple already, but I will repeat them just because, again, this stuff is super important for people to have on hand. Because anyone listening to this podcast right now, you are now going to be the one in your friend group that can potentially save someone from a challenging experience. So, you know, make sure you understand that and just keep some of this stuff on hand. So nano-encapsulated CBD will counteract the intoxicating effects of Delta-9 THC. Great thing to keep around. Just look up nano-encapsulated CBD online, grab a bottle of it, keep it around. Good to have in the cupboard. Black pepper kernels, another good thing. That's the Willie Nelson trick. Willie Nelson almost had to stop smoking cannabis. Talk about identity crisis. So pepper kernels, you know, and now that works for him, right? So those are some like tactile, actual things.
Like crush up and then consume under the tongue, or just
yeah, great question. So yeah, what you would want to do is you'd want to chew them and get them sublingually. So underneath your tongue, it's going to be gross as hell. That's why I recommend CBD, but it does work. So you could chew them a little bit or just break them up beforehand and put it under your tongue. That would be the fastest way to get that into your system. You could swallow them, but typically if people are having a challenging experience, they're not like, I'm going to wait 40 minutes and I'll, you know, feel the effects of this, you know? So that's a quick way to do it. And then when it comes to other things, overall, typically when people are having a challenging experience, it's anxiety, it's paranoia, it's these kind of things. It's over up regulation. It's you're spinning too fast, right? You're thinking too fast, you're breathing too fast, your heart's beating too fast, you're sweating too fast. So overall, you want to slow down, right? And one of the best ways to do this is with the breath. So typically, for anyone who hasn't seen box breathing before, what I like to do, now typically box breathing is going to be like a 4-4-4-4. I like to change it up a little bit. I like to do 4-7-8 because typically when you want down regulation and you want parasympathetic nervous system activation, you want to be exhaling longer than you're inhaling. So you're going to be inhaling for 4 seconds through your nose. You're going to be then holding that breath for 7 seconds. And then you're going to be breathing out for 8 seconds. And then you can add on, I wouldn't do this right off the bat because sometimes it can actually lead to more anxiety. You can lead into like a 4-second count at the bottom of that breath before you start breathing in again, right? So typically what I'll do is I'll do 4-7-8 for about 5 to 10 rounds. It takes like 3 minutes. Sounds like a lot, but it's not really. Then I'll start adding that second, breath hold down at the bottom. And within about 5 minutes, you'll notice right away, like, oh, I'm not in the state I was before. I might not be perfectly comfortable. I might still be a little shook, but I'm not in that state anymore. And certain times when this happens, you'll also then start going into the shakes, right? You'll start going into that. And so that can totally happen. The other thing that I love is the mantra. I took a medicine and the medicine is working. This one helped me a lot on a different psychedelic at a music festival a week ago, right?
Okay.
Sometimes you do everything you can and something just goes awry, right? And so this one really saved me because it reminds you, hey, I chose to do this. I'm not a victim, right? I'm going to be okay. The most challenging part of anything is if you're not in a good setting or you're not around people that make you feel comfortable. That's why it's so important to have a high quality set and setting. Again, at a music festival, for instance, you can't really control the setting. Just have someone with you. Like I had Rachel with me, so I wasn't that worried. I was like, I don't mind if I can't walk because I'll be able to be led by her. So it'll be okay. And it was actually a beautiful night, because I just went back to the tools, just breathed, did the mantra. Within 5 minutes, I'm like, all right, I got this. It's going to be mildly uncomfortable, but whatever, So again, at the end of the day, that can take an ordeal and make it into a funny experience again, and that's how it's a really responsible thing to know just those 2 tools, because again, you're going to be around someone eventually that does not know that. And the amount of power you're going to have to be able to just go, hey, catch your breath. Let's breathe together. All right, cool. You got this? All right, let's do it. All right, now repeat after me. I took a medicine. Medicine is working, right? You just teach people that stuff and now they can go teach someone else. And with psychedelics, cannabis, et cetera, becoming so popular, we're going to see more and more of this stuff happening. Right. And I speak for everyone on this podcast. I guarantee everyone on here, you guys are the one in your friend group. And what I mean by that is the one that's diving into all of this kind of weird rabbit hole stuff, right? So it's our responsibility, right? We get to be that person that has that cool trick, the same way that your other friend might know how to fix your tire when it blows in your car, right? This is our trick, right? And so again, we're all mechanics in different ways. And so just having those couple of things, plus the nano-encapsulated CBD and the pepper kernels on hand, that works fantastically.
Great tips. Those I did not know too. So I love that you hit that. So we did a trip, good and or bad. We learned something. And now we have some things to implement. Going to implement those. This is post-trip now. Now we're like, okay, we have a journal of our tips and whatnot. Now, I think there's a time to set boundaries with this medicine as well, right? I think post-trip is a good marker of hey, I did it this day. It's done now. Setting boundaries, because I think we all have had, if you engage with cannabis, we've all have had at one point or another had to stop. It wasn't working for you anymore. You didn't have boundaries and it overtook you, gave you anxiety, whatever the case may be. Would you say having boundaries post, having a trip or connecting with it is, advised?
Yeah. What I would say overall is, there's not going to be one right or wrong answer, but I will tell you this, right? So what I typically tell people is if you are passionate about having a conscious relationship with cannabis, you got to make sure you can take 3 days off in a row, right? Whatever you can't take 3 days off of owns you. Paul says that. I love it. It's been a great ethos of mine. And I've found this works really well with people, right? So again, like I said, if I go to a music festival, I'm probably going to connect with a little bit of cannabis every day, right? I've never been an all day smoker. I just never liked it. It burned me out too much. I'm too high energy, but it's always been a nighttime thing for me. So I might do that 7 days in a row. But then when I get home, I'm going to make sure that I'm going back to my typical schedule, which is Monday through Friday, no cannabis. On the weekends, it's optional if I feel like I can handle it and I have the space for it and I have a genuine reason to want to dive into it, right? If I'm stuck somewhere, I can't seem to solve something with the same level of thinking that created it, I then go behind the veil, connect with the plant, learn something new about myself, then implement it the next week. So what I would tell people is, and the last thing I want to do is give anyone like some guilt or shame, right? There's no guilt or shame. Like everyone has their own life. There is no right or wrong. But what I will say is this, right? I personally, and the people I work with, they come to me at a certain point when they do not want to feel like cannabis is controlling their lives anymore. And the funny thing is, the first thing I have them realize is it's not anything to do with cannabis. You are trying to control your life, right? And you are probably telling yourself unconsciously that there are good emotions and bad emotions. And good emotions are very useful. Bad emotions are just an annoyance. So get them out of the way as fast as possible. And so what I help them realize is actually all of that is good, because a lot of times, just like when you play chess, right? I used to play chess with my dad and I'd get absolutely wrecked by him every time. And I get frustrated and you go, Ryan, don't get upset. You only learn things when you lose, right? And so again, like I've heard another one of my mentors say, you should be excited to fail, right? You should be excited to get things quote unquote wrong, right? And so at the end of the day, it's not something to feel shame over or guilt over or anything like that. It's just simply to realize that cannabis can work so much better when you are not codependent with it. It's the same as a relationship, right? Like how great of sex can you have with your partner if you're literally depending on him or her to live your entire life for you, right? You wake up and you're like, can you give me a kiss? I just need a kiss or I can't feel good without you, right? How attractive are they going to be to like, have sex with you, right? And again, judgment, just again, I'm just using the example. So with cannabis, we don't think about it the same way as the plant, but it's a living being, right? And if it feels you're coming to it all the time, it's going to feel a little nervous to show you the real shit, right? Like it's because it's going to know I might overwhelm this person, and also you're not going to be able to have a endocannabinoid system that is flushed enough to really access the true power of the plant, right? So again, the exemptions from this or the exceptions to this would be if someone right now is listening and they're using cannabis to go through Crohn's disease or cancer or something like that. I am not saying that for you should take days off, right? Like that's something we can talk about privately for sure. Like there are ways and things, but I don't want anyone to think, oh, I'm on cancer treatment for cannabis, but Ryan said I should take 3 days off. Definitely not the case, right? So like I said, I'll generalize, but I want people to make sure that I want to make sure that people know that I'm telling them like, hey, use some discernment with this. If you're using it to get off pharmaceuticals or something like that, there's going to be some bending in this. But for the average consumer who's like healthy, that's listening to this, that wants to be highly optimized, shameless plug, right? So if you want to do that and you really want to access these powers, I highly recommend taking a minimum of a 3-day break per week and then making sure that you're really aware of like when you're craving cannabis and why, because that can tell you a lot too, right? Mm-hmm. Cannabis can show you a lot without ever interacting with the plant. And what I mean by that is say you've been dependent for a while. And so you decide to take like a 3-month break. During this time, you might believe like, oh, well, my lessons with cannabis have ended for now. And when I get back to cannabis, then I'll keep learning. But if you started to notice when you craved it, maybe you realized, oh shit, every time I get to work, I just crave cannabis so much. What does that inform me to? Maybe I'm not at the right job, right? So again, like you can start learning lessons from cannabis, even in the absence of it. And that's what I tell a lot of people is, let's say you have a romantic partner and that romantic partner and you have been living together for say 5 years, right? And you really know each other. And let's say that you now are at a job where they're going to give you a promotional deal, right? And you're going to make $300,000 extra a year, but you got to move a town over, right? So you could think like, oh, man, what would my partner say? She'd say, go for it. All right, I'm going to go for it, right? So you can think because you know them well enough, like what they would say. Cannabis works very similar. And that's a lot of what we think to do in the program is be like, what would cannabis tell you? Like you can tap into that softer version of yourself without the plant. What would it tell you? What would you tell you? Because that's really what's happening. Cannabis is just a permission slip to have a different part of you come forth. That's all that's happening, right? So at the end of the day, you can tap in and go, say you're about to argue with someone, right? You could tap in and go, what would my softer version of myself say? It would say that even if I feel I'm right, it's not worth spending this energy because this person and I are just not seeing eye to eye. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong and I'm right or anything. It just means that, you know what, this is not a good use of energy for either of us. And I'm just going to agree to disagree and walk away, right? So you don't need cannabis to continue getting these lessons. And so that's why I say that when I get stuck, that's when I'll go back in, because that happens often, right? Like I'll get stuck and be like, I really can't seem to figure this out. I'll go behind the veil and I'm like, ah, man, it was right there, and now I know a different aspect of myself that I can call on if I feel that situation present itself again. So yeah, that's what I would recommend overall.
Great, great pro tip right there. Asking yourself what the plant would do and accessing it on your own.
Yeah.
All right, very awesome pro tip. Very, very last question is, I know cannabis, I'm not 100% sure, but I do know it upregulates you, right? So that's the nervous system being upregulated, and it's draining. Anytime you do anything, whether it's lifting heavy weights, studying, using your brain, and I believe cannabis as well, upregulating the nervous system is going to deplete a lot of nutrients. It's going to make you a bit more tired. You mentioned earlier that the endocannabinoid system can also be exhausted and overused. Nutrition-wise, lifestyle and habits-wise, for us post-trip or post-connection, what are some good tips for us to re-nutrient ourselves with sleep, any supplements, or, want to hit on that real quick?
This is perfect. Yeah. So I'm going to blow your mind probably, because I just got my mind blown about this. So Dr. Jason Ganzuk, you know him, right? Through Paul. Have you met Dr. Jason before?
Not yet, no.
Dude, guy's awesome. You should definitely get him on the pod. I work very closely with him. He's actually my doctor. Man. Wow. So he got really into mineralizing the body. And this is something that a couple of people are talking about. There's another guy that I've had on, Hamid Jabir. He's the mineral shaman. So, when we look at like the topsoils, going back to how we started, right? When we look at what's going on in the world, why is our food supply so fucked, right? Even the organic food, why is it so minerally deficient? Well, the topsoils have been depleted. Therefore, the microbes are not there. Therefore, the soluble nutrients are insoluble, or they're not there at all. So the plants that are being grown are minerally deficient. Then the animals that eat those plants are also minerally deficient. So whether we're vegetarian or carnivore, right, we're eating either plants or animals, and we are then minerally deficient. So that's why a lot of, health gurus start saying like recently, like you got to supplement these days, you just got to do something. So think about the average person consuming cannabis, right? And again, no judgment here, but think about fast food, shitty water or no water, alcohol, stress, all these things. So they are in a minerally deficient state. Then they're going to cannabis, psilocybin, etc., which all take minerals from you. It's not anything crazy. It's not like, oh my God, this is terrifying. Like exercise will do it too. It's not a bad thing, right? It's just something to be aware of, because if you're in a chronically deficient state, well, there's a lot of things that can happen, especially if you're drinking fluorinated water. You can become overly calcified. Now, when you're overly calcified, you literally are building a calcium shell in your body. And what happens is you will not be emotionally available. Like there are actual practical things that come out of these mineral imbalances that people will recognize. You could have ED, you could have all these different things, inflammation, all these things, right? So cannabis, like most plant medicines, goes after calcium, which for a lot of people is why they feel good when they interact with cannabis, because they're already overly calcified. Cannabis takes them away. They all of a sudden feel like more connected. They feel happier. They feel these things, right? Little do they know that if they just stop drinking fluorinated water and doing some of these other things, they could take that calcium away, right? Calcium's not bad. It's just you don't want it in excess. The other thing it goes after is copper. Now, when you look at iron and copper, iron is masculine, copper is feminine. This does not mean, for anyone listening, to go out and start supplementing with copper, right? It's not that simple. And depending on what you're eating, right, and what quality of food you're getting, you could be making that up fine, right? Like it could be fine, depending on how much cannabis you're connecting with as well. So when you work with Dr. Jason or someone like this, they'll get you to do a HTMA test, a hair test mineral analysis. And so when I got mine back, my copper was actually perfect, right? So that's a perfect example of how, like, just because it takes copper doesn't mean that my copper was low, right? It just means that it's something to be aware of. But I did have certain inconsistencies, right? And so molds can do this, like heavy metals, is all different types of things, right? So when we think about doing plant medicines and connecting with them, these kind of things, it's impossible for me to give exact things, but I'll give some really good things to be aware of. Electrolytes are awesome, just overall. Magnesium is fantastic. Most of us, like, not in the bubbles we're in and Paul Chek's crowd and stuff, but most of the world is very magnesium deficient. Other things include omega-3s. Omega-3s are great for optimizing the endocannabinoid system's function. Dark chocolate, blueberries, things with what's called anthocyanins in them. Those are really good. Also things that have like anandamide, like dark chocolate, that would be really good as well. There's a whole list of things online that you can find that will optimize your endocannabinoid system. But what I would recommend, if someone listening to this is like me and Miguel, and you like to be highly optimized and you want to go the extra mile, get an HTMA test for like $150 and find someone, could be Dr. Jason, could be Hamid, someone else, who can read it for you and actually start remineralizing your body. Because when that happens, I am telling you, cannabis, all these things, they will work extremely well. I actually think that might have happened at this festival, is that I've been on this protocol for 3 months with all these different herbs and whatnot, and I hadn't connected with any medicines because I rarely connect with other medicines these days. I feel great all the time, so I haven't really needed to. And so I decided to dive down the rabbit hole. At Muse Festival, took a very small dose of something because I was aware, setting, all the things, and it felt like the strongest experience I had ever had, right?
Wow.
No, I'm actually meeting with Dr. Jason to be like, hey, what happened there? Because I'm curious, because now I can speak about it and be like, hey, for instance, if you're eating Bacopa, do not connect with medicines, right? I don't know if that was the herb that was responsible, but that would be an example. And so I would say for like ground level, electrolytes, magnesium, omega-3s, things with anandamide like dark chocolate, really good, because anandamide is an endocannabinoid. So there's two different types of cannabinoids. There's endocannabinoids and there's phytocannabinoids. So endocannabinoids, endo stands for endogenous, right? They're made within our body. The two most popular are anandamide. Ananda comes from the Sanskrit word bliss. It's responsible for the runner's high, et cetera, exercise high. The other one is 2-AG, way too long to pronounce the whole thing. So when you want to optimize your endocannabinoid system, you want to be ingesting things and taking things in that are going to optimize anandamide and 2-AG production, right? Along with other things as well, things that are going to take away inflammation, things like that. So those are always great things to be connecting with just overall, but especially after a ceremony when you wanted to recuperate, And again, like, it doesn't mean that if you connect with a little bit of cannabis at night every night that you're going to be horribly minerally deficient. There are obviously other challenges that we've spoken about in here that could present themselves, numbing out, running away from your problems, things like that. But it's good for everyone. I'd recommend everyone get an HTMA test. Out of all the money I've spent on myself, which is a ridiculous amount, this was one of the things that I've clearly felt the effects of more than almost anything else I've done. So yeah, really good stuff.
Okay. Very, very, very awesome, man. You are a well of fucking wisdom, man.
Thanks,
Jeez,
man.
thank so
You make it
much.
easy, man, with good questions.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much, man. For your program, Connecting with Cannabis, what is that, and who's it for? Who's that product for? Because I know you've really distilled everything in your Connect with Cannabis course. For anybody that wants to deep dive into this, I think that's where to go.
Definitely, man. And what's cool, Miguel, is now we've actually put everything together into what we now call the Conscious Cannabis Collective. Because I had the Connect with Cannabis course, which is all about creating a healthy relationship with the plant and opening the psychedelic powers of the plant. I then had Grow with Cannabis to learn exactly how I cultivate in the way I spoke about in here. And then we had our training program, the Coach with Cannabis program, to get certified as a conscious cannabis facilitator, integration coach, and educator. And so there's too many cooks in the kitchen. So what I really love more than anything, and what I really feel the backbone of everything I do is bringing people together, right? Like, when you're into stuff like this or any of these rabbit holes, it'd be hard to find other people that get it, that can inspire curiosity within you. And so now we have a year-long mastermind. It actually goes longer than that, but you sign up for a year at a time, called the Conscious Cannabis Collective, where you get all 3 of the programs. You get 7 calls per week. You can hop on with me. You can meet all the people in my network, all the people I benefited from through the guest presenters. You get an insane amount of value. You get a Breathe with Cannabis workshop every single month. It's hosted by me, so you can see exactly how I do it with my man, Chris. You get the Slack community. I mean, it is unbelievable. And so for anyone who's interested in that, just go right to my profile at The Real Ryan Sprague. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes too, but you can go right there, send me a DM, say hi. I love chatting. If you got any questions, you can hit me up. And if you want to sign up for a call, qualifying call, because I field all the calls to make sure I'm hand selecting everyone that goes in here, you can just book right in the link that's in my bio, and you can hop in there, book a call, come on with yours truly, and we'll co-create some magic. So that's how you can find me. You can also check out the 2 podcasts, the Highly Optimized podcast and the This One Time on Psychedelics podcast, if you want more free stuff for anyone listening. And yeah, guys, I'd love if you hit me up. I love talking if it wasn't clearly evident in this episode. So thank you again, Miguel. It's been a blast.
Yeah, you could even get certified in that.
Oh yeah,
that community.
Yep.
Wow,
100%. We have about 60 certified coaches out there now doing the thing, and it's going to be very big. Like I tell everyone, like there's going to be fewer people that are like, yes, I would like to go into a conscious cannabis ceremony, right? Like that's going to be a lot for a lot of people. But think about cannabis is already $100 billion industry, and federal legalization hasn't even happened yet. That's just in America, just in the states that have medical and recreational legalization. So think about how many people are just going to want to know, like, what does THC mean? What is vaping versus smoking? Like things that for any of us that are in the world of cannabis, we would never think people don't know this. Everyone knows that. I'm telling you guys, I worked at a dispensary. 95% of people have zero idea what they are doing, and they would pay someone to be able to help them. And think about when you understand all the spiritual stuff too, how many challenges you are going to be able to mitigate for them and how rewarding it's going to be doing it. And I tell everyone that's already a coach, like, don't you think you'd want to know if your client's relationship with cannabis was impeding on the work you guys are doing together? Like, if you don't understand this stuff, it's impossible for you to know. And they could be standing in their own way of getting results by keeping this pattern going. And so again, the other side too is, don't you think people will want to learn how to save 70% plus on their monthly cannabis expenses by growing their own? Wouldn't everyone listening to this want to learn how to do that? It's like, there are so many practical things, and that's what we do. We give you a lot of different options in terms of what you could do with the certification. Because I tell everyone, right? Like, it's not like most clients are going to ask you where you're certified through, but it's going to give you the permission slip to be able to feel you are worthy of going out and doing this. And we're going to make sure before you're certified. We have you trade off sessions with other people. I'm there mediating. You have a final exam. You got everything, right? So you're going to feel fully equipped to go out there and be fit for this service when you leave. It's really fun, man. We have a blast.
Okay, Matt, thank you so much for being on, bro. I'll let you get to your day, man. Thank you so much.
Bro.